Hi, everyone. Clarice Schillinger and BethAnn Rosica with the Moms in the Middle podcast. Sorry, we've been a little MIA. As you can imagine, we were working tirelessly on the election and for candidates that will put our children and their education first. As many of you know, that is our primary reason we are even in this fight or have become so educated on politics. It's not something that I think either of us expected that we would know so much about. So, some of you are celebrating the victories from Tuesday, and some of you have the hangover from the election. And BethAnn and I thought that it was super important that we come on and express our feelings. And please understand that we do try to take the most moderate approach, what is best for our country, our commonwealth, our children. So I did help Dr. Oz on his campaign. He called me every week to check in on the new happenings within the education system across Pennsylvania and seemed to be very engaged and concerned with what is happening. I I was disappointed that he did not win on Tuesday, and I think that it's appropriate that I give the reasons why. Number one, he was accessible. I felt as if he was moderate, and also know that he was invested in trimming back the nails of the public school system, or the public school union, I should say, which is embodies teachers, bus drivers, custodians, lunch aides, all the above. And what I mean by trimming back the nails was to really ensure that our public taxpayers were not funding elections. So I go to Fetterman, and Fetterman received millions upon millions of our taxpayer money to run his elections from the National Educators Association. And he clearly stated on the campaign trail that the teachers union, the public school union, Randy Weingarten, who is in Ukraine advocating for children there who are virtually learning, but did not for us at home, that she would be at the decision making table because she is apparently the expert and parents are not. John Fetterman quoted that the NEA, the National Educators Association, will be at the decision making table in Washington, D.C. And this is something that Oz agreed that parents should be at the table. So I think that's enough for me and how I feel about really the loss that for me that happened. But BethAnn, I'd love to have your comments on what you think happened Tuesday.
There's so much to comment on that I'm not exactly sure where I want to start because, as you shared, Clarice, we really are the moderates in the room and on the stage talking about these issues. And I think that sadly, what we saw was that there weren't a lot of great moderate candidates on the ballot. I don't think that anybody could disagree that John Fetterman is nowhere near a moderate. He's very, very extreme. Doug Mastriano, not a moderate, very, very extreme. Obviously, polar opposites, but also polar extremes. And I think that that really was the deciding issue for this election was some very polarizing issues and voting against some of the extremes. In terms of the governor race, I think that a lot of people voted against Mastriano, not necessarily for Josh Shapiro. But I also think that sadly, the abortion issue became the issue in Pennsylvania that brought out a lot of the suburban moms and women all over the state. I've shared on this podcast previously, prior to COVID, I was a registered Democrat for my entire career, 34 years, voted Democrat. And really, based on that issue, I am a pro-choice person, but I also am not an extremist on that. And I think that that whole conversation, I think when we talk about moderate positions, I think that that really, the abortion issue, the pro-life, pro-choice, really comes down to what is a moderate position, because I don't care what anyone says, there's no such thing as no exceptions. That you can't be pro-life with no exception, and you can't be pro-choice with no exception. Okay, so I think that this is really where there was some failed messaging and failed positions. Quite frankly, I'm sick of men talking about what women should or shouldn't be able to do with their bodies. I mean, this is, it's a big issue, and it was disappointing to me that after the 2.5 years that we spent with lockdowns and mandates and our children suffering and school closures and mental health issues, that I think after this election, we're in worse shape than we were prior to this election. And I really thought that this election was going to change things in a positive way. And I am not feeling that way several days after the election.
Yeah, I totally agree. Running for lieutenant governor and you being by my side, I remember saying to you when we would get back in the Tahoe from events and saying, why is it a man that's always screaming at me about pro life and pro choice? And I think that a lot of women can actually relate to that because there are a lot of things that do happen during pregnancy. There's just, pregnancy is not always perfect. It's just not. And there are many different things, and having exceptions is extremely important on both sides, truly on both sides. We cannot go extreme to the left, extreme to the right, setting parameters. But what I really have saw this last election is that this topic of abortion took over critical, critical topics that we should have been talking about: the crime, our children, education, our economy. And women got so scared that they were going to be stripped away from rights. And that messaging on the left side really pushed people and women in to fear that they, even though they might have not have wanted to vote the way that they did, they knew who was going to stand up for them with the abortion topic. And stand up for them, I mean, as setting the parameters. I was a teen mom. That's what I chose. And but I also know that of women that have had very serious complications with pregnancy and have had to take different routes by advice from their doctor. You and I are not doctors. I don't think that most of the people even voting on Tuesday are doctors, but it's very heartbreaking to see that that issue really clouded super important topics, the curriculum that's happening, the crime that's happening, and all the above. So I did want to ask you, BethAnn, is how do you feel with, we went into the primary with the Republican ticket. Let's just talk about statewide for a second, because there's 67 counties and so many candidates. But statewide had three offices, and that was the governor, the lieutenant governor, U.S. Senate. And the Republicans went in to the primary with 26 candidates on the ballot, and the Democrats went in with 8 candidates on the ballot for these three offices. What do you think that impact made on what happened in the general?
Well, I think that there's a couple of issues to drill down on here. I think, first of all, the Democratic candidates entered the general election season in much better shape, both financially and emotionally,
Yes.
because they didn't, Josh Shapiro ran uncontested in the primary, so he didn't even have to campaign. So he was very refreshed and ready to go when the general election season started. Whereas Doug Mastriano was fighting it out, with 7 other potential candidates. So the fatigue and the dollars, number one, I think played a really big issue in all of this. And I think that overall, the Democrats just did a better job keeping the field to be not so crowded so that voters could do the research on the handful of candidates that were there and make good decisions. Republicans had a very difficult time. Who's going to research 26 candidates? Nobody that I know is going to spend the time to do that research. And without an endorsement, without recommendations from the party, a lot of people were just left to their own devices to either not vote or, it's like pin the tail on the donkey. Let's just see, where the bullet lands.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you on that. No one has the time to research 26 candidates. We work, very closely to this, and we still don't have the time to research 26 candidates. So the person going to work and raising kids, day in and day out just wants to know, who do I go into the poll and vote for? And when I was running for lieutenant governor, I had made a recommendation to the Republican Party chairman to do a top three on each of the categories for statewide governor, lieutenant governor, and U.S. Senate to really help eliminate the voter confusion, help voters really get behind certain people instead of being so torn. I knew just myself running for lieutenant governor, I had a hard time thinking, well, which one of these amazing people, there were some of the governor candidates that I got very, very close with. If we remember Dr. Zama, the heart surgeon, and Dave White, the steam fitter, there were some really great candidates who threw their hat in the ring. And it was even hard for me to say, well, I don't know who I would want to be teamed up with as a candidate for lieutenant governor. But what what I think is very important is the Republican Party. They have a divide that some people believe in endorsements and some people want an open primary process. And I think that us, as the moms in the middle, it is a real compromise to at least ask the Republican Party to start putting, recommended candidates, a top three for voters to really dig into, so that we do not end up with a very one-sided state. And that's exactly what happened on Tuesday. I'm more upset that it's a one-sided state instead of the moderate approach. When we have the check and balances in the government, when we have, Republicans and Democrats at an almost equal level playing field, it creates it creates conversation. It creates, that they have to work together, and that's really what we want. We don't want the tyranny that we experienced the past 2.5 years. So I I personally hope that the candidates that were elected, I wish them the best. Obviously, I am a proud Pennsylvanian, and just plead that they will have parents at the decision making table. They will have taxpayers in mind, and start adopting some of the moderate more approaches than the radicalism. I do have a fear that Fetterman and even Shapiro, he got a lot of money from the public school union, that they will start taking into account our children, their education, and the next steps in their life, truly investing and giving purpose to our children instead of pushing, very, very toxic things upon them. What do you think?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from Tuesday's election in Pennsylvania is that the teachers union was the biggest winner. And that is what I'm most disappointed about. I don't ever like supporting candidates who take money from the teachers union, because then they're obligated to represent their interests in front of moderate, everyday Pennsylvanians. And, Fetterman was very clear about where the NEA and the AFT would sit, as you talked about at the beginning of our show. Shapiro has been a little bit more quiet about it. He did not advertise, on a regular basis how much money he was taking from the teachers union. He was certainly endorsed by the PSCA, and they gave him a bunch of money. Now, Shapiro has publicly said that he would support some version of school choice, and that certainly does not align with the teachers union. I only hope that he lives up to his campaign promises and fulfills that pledge to support school choice in some capacity. And he can rest assured that you and I and our
That's
parent
what I was going to
coalition
say.
across the state, that we will be reminding him of this on a regular basis. He also said that he does not believe in mandates or in school closures or in lockdowns. So we will continue to remind him when cold and flu season really heats up and people are getting COVID and things are happening. We're going to remind him that there will not be closures, there will not be mandates, because he ran on a platform that we can trust individuals to make their own decisions. So at least he put that on the table during the campaign, and he can rest assured that we are going to hold him accountable to those campaign promises he made. And if he lives up to that, then I feel comfortable that we will be able to move forward in a more moderate platform where the teachers union is not the power that is dictating policy throughout Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I certainly I am also thankful that he put that out on the record when he was running because as many of you know, BethAnn and I are not shy to go to Harrisburg. We are not shy to go to Washington, D.C., and we will keep them accountable for the campaign promises that they've made. Obviously, we do not have as big a megaphone as the teachers union does, but we will continue to make sure that these candidates are truly held accountable for the campaign promises that they've made. I hope that in the next cycle and as BethAnn and I continue on our work and helping school board candidates and being a resource and being the moderate tone, I hope that both sides can really take note from what happened on Tuesday, the single issue voting that happened on Tuesday, and really stop the extremism on both sides. Because if we do not stop the extremism, it will always be the suburban woman or the blue collared man, whatever that looks like, going into the ballot box and voting on a single issue because the voters get overwhelmed with so many issues that we have to just take a step back, really truly help and invest in our candidates, hug them, thank them for running. That's not easy. It's not easy to put your entire life out there and leave your family and travel. So I hope that next time around, and especially in 2023, there will be school board races in Pennsylvania. And what we saw in 2021, I am encouraging people to understand that this is members of your community that are your neighbors. Be kind. If you do not like them, don't vote for them. That's it. So I really hope that we can stop. I mean, I think that all of us feel a bit hungover, whatever side you are on, from all the ads and the negativity that we've had to live through this past 6 months. So let's try to make sure that the next election, 2023, which is a more local election, will be a bit better. What do you think, BethAnn?
I agree. And I think that, we talked about this on one of our other podcasts. My biggest disappointment with this election was just the lack of conversation around education. All of the academic indicators that we've seen across the state and across the country about how much our kids have suffered academically, losses, the mental health issues, all of the issues that are facing our young people today. And I thought that it was a really, really big miss that none of the candidates were talking about that. And I hope that the folks that won, that are going to Harrisburg and going to Washington, understand that there is a much bigger issue here than abortion. Abortion affects such a small number of people on any given day, yet education impacts every single one of our children every single day of the year. And the fact that we were not focused on that or even talking about it is just heartbreaking to me. I get it. The whole Supreme Court, the overrule of Roe versus Wade was a big deal, and that's what the sides latched onto, and that's what the extremes latched onto. But yet nobody was there in the face of all of that, waving the flag for our kids and saying, hey, wait a minute, what about what's happening in our schools? So
Well,
now,
except us and our parents.
yes,
I
yes.
mean, they have. I mean, how many of us and the parents that work with us and share stories with us, you and I said for the past 6 months, education is the miss of the midterms.
Yep.
And the reason why we said it was the miss of the midterms is education is a bipartisan. Many people agree that they want their children to really be educated and ready for the next step of their life, whatever that is, military, trades, college, does not matter. Parents, taxpayers can agree, Democrat or Republican or independent, that we want our schools to start equipping our children with the necessary tools that they need to be successful. And it is very apparent in the national report card that we are not doing that. So, whether that's creating competition within our education system, whether that's trimming back the nails of the teachers' union, there has to be some kind of change that is happening because the data proves it, the data shows it, the numbers show it, and obviously you and I will continue to fight for this. But education, without question, miss of the midterms. It is a bipartisan message and should have been talked about over and over again across Pennsylvania, across the nation.
No, I agree. And, if you look at the maps, so let's look at Pennsylvania as a microcosm for the rest of the country. Okay, Pennsylvania is heavily Democratic in the Southeast and in Philadelphia. And then, a couple of sections, near Pittsburgh and up in Allentown, very, very liberal, very, very blue. The rest of the state is red. It's all Republican in the rest of the state. So we have a state divided. And honestly, I feel bad for a lot of the people out in Western and Central PA that we met when we were on the campaign trail because they're sitting there scratching their heads saying, how in the world could the Democrats have won both the governor and the U.S. Senate race after the last 2.5 years that we had? And really, like we said, it comes down to that abortion issue. But again, you look at the rest of the country, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. We have the Northeast and the Pacific West that are all blue and very liberal, and the rest of the country, with a couple of exceptions, are red. So to me, the way to bring our country together, the way to focus on nonpartisan issues is education, because that is something that we all can agree on, that it is imperative that our kids are getting the academic rigor that they need to be successful, or the vocational skills that they need to be successful in life. And I'm hoping that, as the divide seems to continue to grow and grow and grow, that this is really the opportunity for us to focus on education and bring people together. Unfortunately, I think the only way that's going to happen is to significantly diminish the impact that the teachers unions have on our schools and on our kids.
Yeah, I do agree. We just recently will be releasing an article after this podcast, but it does go in to say about the importance of the southeast of Pennsylvania's voting block. And it might not be important in a primary, but it was very clear that it is critically important in the general. 40%, that's a large number, and having candidates with a moderate message. I've said it 1,000 times. It's not about winning the primary; it's about winning the general. And that 40% in the southeast is purple and moderate, and probably purple a little bit more, even blue. And not being able to have a moderate message. I mean, Shapiro did, like you mentioned before. He has said he is for a form of school choice. He has said that he's against mandates, and I obviously we will keep him accountable for that. but I hope that his moderate message really does hold true, because that is what wins elections, and that is what won the Southeast, the 40% block, and it will continue to win. Do you have any last thoughts? I think that we should probably get back to writing. We've been doing a lot of writing, so you should check out Broad and Liberty for what we have published so far this week. There's more to come.
I just want to I think we just close with, for those who have had a really tough week and been really disappointed, I think we just say hang in there, and we just have to keep fighting. I know Clarice and I often feel like, what's the point? Why do we continue to do this? We keep getting beat down, but I think that the message has to be one of hope. And if we were not successful in getting the candidates elected that we wanted to this election cycle, the school board candidates next year are even more critical and even more important to make the local decisions that will reflect best for our students. So keep the faith, and let's keep plugging along, keep working, and let's really start getting geared up for school board races next year.
Yes, I can't wait. We're gonna win. We have, the school board has 1,028 pages of power. So let's not diminish how important those races are. I know that the U.S. Senate and the governor, everyone feels energized and pumped up, but this year we hope to give you the same energy for the races that we'll be investing in. So we will see you soon. I'm not sure, probably next week, and have another interesting topic. But we thank everyone that has subscribed and given us positive feedback. And I'm sure that next week we will have another controversial topic to talk about. Thanks so much, BethAnn.
Thank you.